Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. The matcha purists amongst you may want to skip this video, or at least the second half of this video, because in this video I'm going to be first tasting this, our 2021 ceremonial matcha, which has just come into stock. I'm going to let you know my thoughts on it, and then I'm going to be sharing with you a very unconventional way of making matcha, which I use from time to time, actually quite often. So we'll save that for later, but first of all I want to dive into tasting this tea and see how it compares to previous batches of matcha. I've already got hot water in this bowl, so this bowl is nice and warm. I'm going to pour away this hot water because I want to do a sort of semi 10-step tasting with matcha rather than just diving in to the tasting. We want to get some aromatics out of this too. You can see the matcha here. This is 2021, spring 2021 matcha. This is a combination of Uji Hikari and Tenmiu, the cultivar, so a nice blend, same blend as we had last year, although this year it does taste different from my recollection. This is from Uji and it's made by a family of matcha makers in Uji. Elevation on this is around 380 meters. So let's put a couple of scoops into the warm bowl so that we can get some aromatics here. Always got to be careful with matcha. Take your time because otherwise it's inevitable. You're going to get green all over your fingers. Okay, let's just give this a sniff without sniffing too hard. Obviously, I don't want a nose full of matcha powder. It's very creamy. It has a slightly savory note to it. So I'm picking up the L-theanine, that umami note, but I'm also getting a very smooth, sweet, chocolatey aroma. The classics that I always that always spring to mind are white chocolate and porridge, but with an added sort of saltiness to it. So sort of salted porridge and white chocolate. All right, let's put a little bit of water in here. If you've not seen my videos before about, tips to make the best matcha, I'll put a link in the description below. I've also done a video all about how matcha is made when you can follow us in Japan as we learn about matcha and as we source our matcha. So if you're interested in learning more about matcha and you want to understand how matcha is made, then please do check that video out. I do really like that video, I love our tea trip videos. I'm desperate to do more. Okay, let's have a sniff of these wet leaves. And you should not skip this part of the matcha ceremony, matcha ritual, matcha drinking, because you get so much information, just like in Gongfu brewing. Again, creamy, slightly savory, a little bit of brothiness in there, mashed up beans, starchy like barley and adzuki beans or red beans, brothy, a little hint of a pepperiness in there as well, but very, very slight, very, very complex, alluring, but key. And one of the things that I'm always looking for in matcha is, having a creaminess and a warmth and a roundedness to my matcha. Okay, I don't have a measuring shot here, so I'm just going to sort of do this by eye. Stir, make sure that you get all of the matcha which is clinging to the sides into the liquor below, and then start stirring down below, and then you can start your whisking. And I usually prefer to whisk standing up. You get more, it's just an easier motion. But you can see how easily this froths into a beautiful fine crema here. Right, let's give this a taste. Let's focus on texture first. And because of that foam, which is a fundamental part to making good usucha, it's very creamy, it's very soft, it's very velvety. Now let's focus on taste. And If you've tried our 2020 ceremonial matcha, which is made by the same producers from the same cultivars, then you will note that there's a difference. There is a continued creaminess in this. So I'm getting creamy avocados. I'm getting a touch of white chocolate. But I'm also getting a little bit more bite. So I'm getting a little bit more, it's not moving into grass, it's not moving into even herbaceous really. Maybe a tiny bit of the aromatics of torn basil, but as if the basil is being torn sort of about 5 meters away from you. Just a little pick up of that, of those aromatics, a little green in the aromatics. But the bite has a little bit more bitterness. That bitterness is sort of reminiscent of, well, so the creaminess has that sort of walnutty creaminess, but with the skins on. So you've got a little bit of a bitterness which sits for a brief moment on the back of the tongue, sides, moves up to the back, and then dissipates into a finish which is creamy at the beginning, but then as the saliva starts to flow, it's very sweet, a tiny bit lemony, like a little bit limoncello, rather than any sort of citrus note, but a very sweet, sugared juiciness in the finish. And so the difference between last year and this year, last year was all rounded, all warm, and had very little of that bite. This year, the blend has been tweaked, and I think that it's just got a little bit more of a bit more of a journey in the mouth, a little bit more of a bite, and in a way, I felt last year the ceremonial matcha sort of was a little bit on a par with the Masters matcha in terms of that sort of very rounded creaminess and warmth. And I felt like this year we've got more of a difference, and that difference is a really nice difference, because some people like to have a little bit more edge to it. And I'm not saying it's a bitter tea, of course not. We've selected teas which are rich, rounded, umami, savory, creamy, but that little edge there which transforms, and that means when you have a little bit more of that bitterness, you get more of the transformation into the sweetness afterwards. So I'm really, really happy with this year's ceremonial matcha. Let me sniff the empty bowl, which is something, again, I would highly recommend that you do, because as always, you're getting more of the sweetness, and I'm getting like fudges and deep caramels, and maybe a little bit of a slight meadowy touch, but sort of meadowy as a very, very subtle underlayer underneath all of that, or on top of all of that caramel sweetness. Okay, so that's our 2021 ceremonial matcha. Now I'm going to clear this away, and I'm going to show you how I sometimes brew my matcha in a little bit more of an unconventional way. Matcha purists might want to hit stop now. Okay, as you can see, I've got my Gongfu vessel out, I've got a Gaiwan out. I wonder how many of you out there have figured out what I'm going to do, and how many of you actually have done this yourself. Please let me know in the comments section below. So what I'm going to be doing, if you haven't guessed already, is I'm going to be brewing a tea, and I'm going to be using the tea as a substitute for the water to make the matcha. Now, why would I do this? I know all the matcha people out there, the purists are shaking their heads and holding their heads in their hands. First and foremost, I do this from time to time because I enjoy the combination of the taste, and the taste is paramount. That's what it all comes down to. And whilst I would never purchase or really like to consume flavored matcha, as in sort of artificially flavored matchas, or, you know, those sort of vanilla matcha, etc. What I do really enjoy is this combination, a sort of double drop session, if you like, where you are combining the flavors of one tea with another tea, and seeing how they blend. Now, if you've not seen my video about double drop sessions, I'll put a link in the description below. And I do that quite often, where I A/B 2 teas together, or I drink them simultaneously, sometimes mix them, just to see how flavors develop, because that's really the exploration that I enjoy doing. And since matcha is so convenient, it's in this powdered form, you put it in smoothies, you can put it in lattes, you can put it in all sorts of culinary applications, why are we not just combining matcha tea with another tea? And so I've tried this many times, you know, it's part of my sort of ongoing experiments. I'm gonna heat up this guy one whilst I'm talking to you. And I found some combinations which I think really, really work. So the first and foremost reason is flavor, is taste. But there are a couple other reasons why I do this. The second reason is because actually the saponins in tea naturally bring about frothiness, as you can tell in matcha. So if you use tea instead of water, you get extra froth in my experience. You get this very frothy matcha, which I think, I always love the froth in matcha. And you know, if you go back to the Tang Dynasty, that was the sort of, what was most revered in the tea ceremony, is getting as much froth as possible. And certainly, in my experience, you tend to get more froth when you use tea instead of water. So that's the second reason, small one, but it makes a difference to the experience. And lastly, and you know, this is according to, you know, your preferences and what you like to get out of tea, but I enjoy having sessions either at the beginning of the day, or sort of, you know, as the morning is progressing, or if I'm thinking of a big hefty session at night. I like that immediate effect that matcha gives me. It brings me to that tea-lifted state very, very quickly, and it's sort of like a starter or a primer before the main course of the tea itself. I have tried this with many, many teas. There are teas that I would advise you trying, and there were teas that I would say didn't quite work for me. Maybe counterintuitively, I would not use light teas, green teas for matcha, because for this technique, because of the fact that the flavors, the matcha takes over essentially, and you don't really taste the green tea. So I tend to pick teas which are quite opposite, or seemingly opposite from matcha, the matcha taste. Or at least there are some anchor points that join them, or some intersections that join them. So I do enjoy using yenchas. Yencha is great, that roasty, toasty note mixed with the matcha. It's really, really lovely. You get all of that, all of the complexity of a matcha with all of the different flavor notes, and then you underpinning it, you get this really rounded, toasty, almost sort of wine gummy note to the tea, which I really, really love. Black teas work quite well. Souchong liquor or chocolatey black tea works quite well with matcha. I find that sometimes I really love that chocolate matcha combo. A dianhong, like a golden bud, so very tippy golden Yunnan teas can work very, very well, because they have this malty character to them, and malt and matcha works very, very well. So there's a load. You can obviously pick scented teas if you wanted. You could use jasmines if you want, or osmanthus teas, which would obviously just be a very bright and very apparent scented effect. But I like to be a little bit more subtle than that. And one of my favorite combinations is this tea here, baked goods, which is a roasted tieguanyin. And so I think the reason why this works is because you're getting that roasted, charcoal roast, toasted warmth, which really contributes to the matcha experience. But also it has some, baked goods has some floral notes, has some fruity notes, a little bit of cherry, a little bit of mangosteen. It has some caramel notes, a little bit of fudginess, and like flapjack vanilla note. And I think that all of those flavors marry really, really well with matcha. So I'm not going to do a full tasting of baked goods, but I'll put a link in the description below of some videos where I cover it. But think cherry flapjacks. dark baked cherry flapjack. So I'm going to give it a quick rinse, very quick. And then I'm going to do my first brew. So teas that I would not recommend are teas which are, as I said, too similar, too light. And also, I would not recommend doing this if this is the first time you're sitting down with a tea to experience it. Obviously, when you want to sit down and first really get to know a tea, you're going to want to drink that tea pure. Obviously, after you've had your matcha, you're going to continue your session with that tea. So that's not to say that you're not going to enjoy that tea. But of course, if you're wanting to dive into understanding a tea, then you want purity from beginning to end and really understand how the tea develops. So I would only recommend using this with teas that you know very well and you want to have this fun with. I would also say teas that don't give you many infusions, it stands to reason if you're going to be using your first infusion for this matcha, then you're sort of missing out on that. And then if you're only going to get 3 or 4 more infusions out of it, it might not be worth you doing. So, and that again would normally fall into the sort of lighter tea. So I would not advise this for lighter teas, right? I'm going to brew this. I tend to brew it when I know I'm going to be brewing it for my matcha starter, is what I'm calling it now. I tend to brew it a little bit stronger, because I know it's got to, you know, marry and stand up to the matcha. So here we go. We're going to put 2 chashakus of matcha in here. So same matcha. Again, be careful. And then what we're going to do is pour the tea. This is now a nice extraction of baked goods. You can use a filter if you want, if you feel like you are worried about any little bits getting into the matcha. Give this a smell. A lot of cherry notes, a little bit of wood resin as well. Wood resin, and cherry flapjacks. Vanilla. Lovely, lovely tea. In fact, I'll just taste it. So this is what you can do. Brew like in a slightly larger guy one, 150, 180 ml. That way you can taste the first infusion, but you can save, you know, 60 ml for your matcha. And also, very important, you need to brew the tea at the temperature that it needs and then allow it to cool so that it's the right temperature for the matcha. So sort of 80, 70, 80 degrees. That combination of toast, caramel, and fruits. And you know, in some ways, similar flavor profile to a lot of yenchas, but a yencha tends to be a little bit more wood and roast forward. And that's great, as I said, with matcha, but I like this sort of more gentle middle ground, a little bit more vanillaed in my matcha primer. Okay, so we're gonna pour a little bit in here and just allow the temperature to cool down a bit. This metal is getting hot, so that's dissipating heat. And then I can pour this in. Give this a stir. So exactly the same thing. Make a nice paste. And then we're going to pour a shot in here. Again, you don't need to measure it, but just makes things a little bit easier to know you're getting the right proportions or thereabouts. Check that out. Look at that. Super vibrant. Okay, this goes in, so the baked goods goes in, and this will be at around 80 degrees. You can let it cool a little bit more. Okay, now once again, get all of that paste off the sides. Don't push too hard with the whisk. You don't want to damage your whisk. But make sure it's all sitting at the bottom. Then get into the bottom like this. And then you can start frothing. And we'll see if you notice that you get more froth See, I can notice that that is visibly more frothy to me, and the froth is more stable, or the crema is more stable than when I just make it with water. Right, let's see how this tastes. I mean, I've had this before, so I kind of know, but let me try and describe it to you. Definitely more froth, much, much thicker crema. In fact, when you come to drink it, you're going to note that you're going to almost have like a frothy moustache, as you can see. So the experience, I don't want people to think that they're going to have this completely wild, crazy experience. Actually, it tastes like a really good matcha, but the matcha has been given a little bit more different angles of flavors. So much frothier, much creamier. I'm immediately picking up that vanilla flapjack note. So imagine a matcha with vanilla flapjack, or with a flapjack. That combination as a pairing, as a food to drink pairing, would work very, very well. But now you've got that in your bowl. See, I love that. I don't feel like I've somehow like overly masked the matcha flavor. I feel like all of those elements that I was talking about before, you know, the slight white chocolate note, the walnuts, the creamy avocados, the slightly torn basil, that's all still there. It's not being hidden, but I'm just adding to this sort of symphony in my mouth, and adding a little bit of vanilla, a little bit more caramel, a little bit of a sort of dry cherry fruitiness, and as I said, amped up the volume, not just of the flavors, but also of the actual body of the froth. I love this. This is what I do if I really want to get tea lifted. I know I'm going to have a big session. I'll often ask Celine, do you want a matcha primer or a matcha starter? She knows what that means. Are we going to have like a little matcha to begin our session, and then we're going to move into our baked goods? Also, there are some teas which are more gentle, but you really love the flavor. Baked goods being one of them. I would not class baked goods as a tea which is like a real tea lifted tea. And so this way you can get that extra boost if you so wish. And sometimes I don't want that, but you can get that extra boost. You can get that L-theanine rewiring that the matcha gives you, that we all love about matcha. And then you can then move into your main course, your session, and really enjoy it. And you know, I would not really I wouldn't go back and forth. I would finish my matcha and then move into drinking the baked goods. But it's such a wonderful way to start a big session, or start a session where you really know you're going to be sitting and sipping and enjoying teas for the day or for the evening. Look at that froth. Can you see? Can you see how it just stays? And that's because you're adding extra saponins into the combination, and that really makes an amazing stable foam. Anyway, just something I thought I'd share with you. I mean, if you are aghast with horror at what I'm doing, then, you know, fair enough. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with this kind of experimentation, and I actually really have come to love this way of making my matcha. Even in the morning, sometimes I think, oh, what do I want to drink through the day as my tea? And if I think it's going to match with the matcha, then I'll do this this technique. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I hope that it's not going to raise too many eyebrows out there, and that you give it a try. And if you do give it a try, then let me know your favorite combinations, because I'm always keen to experiment and taste. So let's all taste together. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos. Taste our teas wherever you are in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the supreme stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.